This is Doug DeMuro, and today I'm going to talk about cheap cars that make you look rich. This is one of my favorite topics. I'm always thinking about this. You see cars driving along, you think that person is rich, or at least non-enthusiasts think that, but really the car costs $8,000 and has got leaking air suspension. So I'm going to tell you the 8 cars that you can buy cheap that you drive around in a nice neighborhood, people be like, oh yeah, he belongs here. 8 cheap cars that make you look rich. Before we get started, are you ready for your next cool car? Sell your enthusiast car on Cars and Bids. Trading in your car to dealers means you aren't getting market value for your car, leaving you with less cash for your next fun car. Just look at our recent sales of these cool cars compared to current trade-in value. This is a trade-in offer, and this was the Cars and Bids result. This is a trade-in offer, and this was the Cars and Bids result. This is the trade-in offer, and this is the Cars and Bids result. Get started now on carsandbids.com. Sell on Cars and Bids and join the best community to sell your enthusiast car. Okay, cheap cars that make you look rich in no particular order. I'm going to start with a used European station wagon. So a Mercedes-Benz station wagon or a Volvo station wagon. Folks, you can buy a used Volvo V70 station wagon for like $6,000. And if you take that into some wealthy area, people will just think that you're one of those old money rich people who drives a car into the ground because I know the value of $1. I didn't get rich by buying new cars, and you will look right at home even though you just bought a car off Craigslist for 5 G's. This goes doubly for the E-Class wagon, by the way. We sell these on Cars and Bids pretty regularly, and older, cheap, I would say like if we're talking about like the mid-2000s to the mid-2010s, these are $7,000 to $12,000 cars. They are not expensive, and yet they project this air of sort of old money, my daughter rides horses kind of wealth. But they're very, very inexpensive cars. Now, one of the reasons that I've always felt these cars are perfect for this category exactly is that these are not cars that anybody has ever used to flex. So primarily the people who own them really are the rich people that you think. That doesn't work for like a Mercedes GLS. Those are often owned by rich people whose daughters ride horses, but they're also owned by people who want to flex. The flex group doesn't exist with the station wagons. No one has ever bought a Mercedes E350 4MATIC in order to flex, or a Volvo V70 2.4T. That's never happened. And so the only group who buys them is the wealthy folk, and so it has this sort of demographic feel of being rich people, even though anybody can buy one of these cars for basically no money. Okay, next car on the cheap cars that will make you look rich list. This is a very, very, very obvious one. The Maserati Gran Turismo. Maserati Gran Turismo came out 08-09, somewhere in there, and these cars are now selling in the $15,000 to $20,000 price bracket pretty regularly. Like you can buy a cheap early Gran Turismo or a Gran Turismo convertible for 15 to 18, 20 grand. The early ones at that price point have probably been miled up. They probably have been neglected. They're probably not that great to drive, but it is still a fairly modern looking Maserati for not all that much money. And they're also not incredibly expensive to own, as my buddy Nick proved when he bought a Quattroporte and drove it for a while. Like, there's cost to them, obviously, but they're not insane, especially if you understand what you're looking for, buy it a little right, you know, etc. Like if you know what you're getting into and don't just buy the first one you see, you can actually do okay in these cars. And the thing that's interesting about them is they still look like the brand new Maserati Gran Turismo, the one that just came out. It still looks basically identical to the Maserati Gran Turismo that was being sold in 08-09. And so 95% of people driving around don't even really know you have an older car, and 99.7% of people don't know you're driving a $15,000 car. And so this is a great car that you can really flex in if you want to look rich. Now, I will say this really used to be true, but Maserati has managed to devalue its brand so greatly over the last few years that in the mind of the general public, it has been clear that the Maserati brand isn't what it was. So driving this Gran Turismo is no longer the flex that it was at some point, because Maseratis have become more common, cheaper, and more people are aware of that now. Still, it's a pretty interesting car. Okay, next up, cars that will make you look rich for not much money. One of the very best examples of this is the F10 BMW 5 Series. So this was the BMW 5 Series that was sold from like 2011 through 2015. These are incredibly cheap. You can get an early F10 5 Series, not an M5, but just a regular F10 5 Series, pretty easily for $6,000 to $11,000. And I especially bring up the F10 5 Series as a good example of what I'm talking about here because the F10 looks like a very respectable rich guy car. Like if you look at it, it has a very kind of understated, like I'm a respectable businessman kind of style to it, even though they are pretty affordable cars. And so unlike say an E65 Series, which has kind of a wilder look, or a Mercedes-Benz E-Class sedan, which isn't necessarily have the same connotation, an F10 5 Series, you look at it and you think this is just a humble, respectable, mid-tier businessman, probably has 10 or 12 direct reports at a large company. The truth is you bought the car for $9,000 and it has 3 warning lights on, but it looks pretty legit. The other cool thing about the F10, the non-M5s, they were sold with some pretty good powertrains. You could get the 550, which had a twin-turbo V8, or you could get the 535, which had a turbo 6-cylinder that was a pretty potent and exciting powertrain. And these were they're unreliable, I want to be clear. Basically, every car on this list is unreliable, but they were pretty fun and exciting cars, in addition to making you look respectable and wealthy. That is a car that if it is not lowered, if it does not have tinted taillights, if it does not have black wheels, and that's hard to find, but if you can avoid those things, you drive that around and people think you're a lot more legit than you are, given you just spent $7,600 on this car and it has 4 mismatched Chinese tires. Okay, next car that will make you look rich for cheap. This is one that I am surprised even to this day just how cheap it is. The Jaguar XK. And specifically I'm referring to that XK that was sold from like 07 to whenever, but the early ones, the 07, 08, 09s and 10s, those are the ones. You can get one of these Jaguar XKs. We've sold them on Cars and Bids for $10,000 to $15,000, quite a few of them actually. And it's pretty impressive to be able to get a car that looks this beautiful and that has this connotation of wealth and taste and class for this price point. This is a totally rational and reasonable dollar amount to spend. It is an irrational car. It is probably unreliable and problematic. I know from experience that V8 can be tricky, but for $12,000, you drive this around and people think you're just like a retired guy headed off to the country club to play golf with your friends, when in reality you've just spent $12,000 and you scrounged together the money and got the rest from a buy here, pay here law. I'm astonished by what these cars go for, seriously. And so what I would say is, even though this car can probably be problematic, again, most of the cars on this list are, it is still a shockingly good buy if your main goal is to just get something cheap that makes you look rich. It is a beautiful car. It has aged well. The technology has not. The performance is not amazing anymore by modern standards. But from a pure, this is a beautiful car that looks rich. That is exactly what this car is to an almost crazy extent. And on that subject, another car that is similar, that deserves mention on this list, is the R230 Mercedes-Benz SL. So that was the SL that was sold, I think it was sold from 03 to like 2012, somewhere in there. But specifically, again, the early models are the cheap ones, and these cars are unbelievably affordable. We have sold on Cars and Bids early SLs, R230s, for $7,000 to $10,000, which is the same price as the Jag, but is even more impressive because the Mercedes has a power retractable hardtop. The Mercedes SL just has sort of more of a luxury connotation than the Jag, but also, importantly, the Mercedes powertrain is actually more reliable. These early SLs used a 5-liter V8 that was a good, reliable engine. Now, I don't want to sit here and say the Mercedes was a reliable car. They have other issues like the body control suspension, etc., that will make them expensive to own. But to buy a car for $9,000 and then just drive it around like drop top SL. Now again, with these cars, you got to avoid bad aftermarket wheels, black painted wheels, bad modifications, lowered. A lot of these cars have been messed with, and that instantly kills the rich looking vibe. The moment you see one of these on bad, heinous luxurious aftermarket wheels, you know it is not a rich guy. It is some ninth owner who spent $9,000. But if you buy like the rich guy specs, sort of like a silver, a gold, maybe a black on the stock wheels, it is a damn good purchase for $8,000 that it may even be reliable. Of course, it also may not. Nonetheless, those two cars, those two luxury convertibles have depreciated to an almost unbelievable extent, and yet they still have an air of luxury and respectability about them that would make someone think that the driver of the car might be rich and might be going off to some country club or to some investment gathering, if such a thing exists, I don't know, to do something. Those cars are in that range. Okay, next up, cars that make you look rich even though they're cheap. This is actually a really good one that is way overlooked, and that would be the original Hyundai Equus, which was sold from 2011 to like 2016-17. The original Hyundai Equus, obviously the badge and branding itself will not make you look rich, but I saw one of these on the road the other day, and one of the things that hit me is it is a big car with big presence. Like, it has like a big grille and big tall sides and a big trunk. Like, it looks big and luxurious, and it's not really badged. If you look at this car, there are no Hyundai badges on it. Like, they have this cool like flying bird badge on the front and the back. It says Equus. It never really says Hyundai. And so people will notice this car and think you're in some really big high-end luxury sedan, which you are. Ultimately, this car was intended to rival the Mercedes S-Class, the Lexus LS, etc. But you're in a Hyundai, and it's a cheap car. We've sold these on Cars and Bids for $10,000 to $20,000. That's with a 430 horsepower smooth V8. These are good cars. They are reliable cars. They get miles on them based on some of these ones on Cars and Bids. They get driven, they get used, and yet they still look respectable and luxurious. Now, people are not going to look at you and instantly know, oh, that person has a Mercedes or that person has a Jaguar, but they are going to know that person is rich. He's driving a big luxury sedan. I don't know what it is, so it must be something special. And it's up to you whether you want to tell them that you're in a Hyundai or not. Nonetheless, it is quite an impressive luxury car that you can buy pretty cheap. $15,000 buys you a legitimately nice one with a ton of luxury equipment and this sort of flex on other people kind of look on the road. Like, I'm big, I'm luxury, I'm serious. They might not know what it is. In fact, they probably won't, but that almost adds to the allure and the appeal of the luxury. And I'm telling you, this interior, I rented one of these on Turo one time for a couple days. Actually, it was at the launch of the new Toyota Supra years ago, and it's just a nice car. Like, it is a nice, wafting, smooth, nice luxury car. So not only do you look rich, but you feel rich. Okay, on the subject of big luxury sedans, basically any used big luxury sedan will be cheap to buy and will make you seem rich, but I will say some do the job better than others. Specifically, a W220 Mercedes-Benz S-Class does not make you look rich. Most people know that that was kind of the cheap one, and they've aged cheaply and they don't look great. Same deal with the E65 BMW 7 Series. Does not age well, does not look good, does not make you look rich. However, a Audi A8 from 2003 to 2010 or whenever it went away, that would be the D3 A8. That car makes you look rich. For one thing, the overall style is still fairly similar to what they're using today. For another thing, they have these big aluminum, these big wheels, these silver wheels with many spokes that just like oozed wealth and power. But also, the A8 has always kind of been the connoisseur's choice. It's like the guy who buys it isn't just some rich guy who doesn't know any better. It's like the architect or the thinking man chose the A8 instead of the regular Mercedes-Benz S-Class or the 7 Series. And so the result of that is that as these cars have gotten to the used market, they still sort of retain that reputation. You see an old 7 Series and you assume it's some guy wanting to flex because he can get into a cheap used one. You see an old A8 and you're like, oh, that must be a thinking man trying to flex. No, but seriously, I mean, these cars, and I'll tell you something, early D3 A8 is a $9,000 to $14,000 car. They are shockingly cheap to buy, shockingly cheap. And the 4.2 liter V8 versions are pretty reliable, although there are a lot of electronics and stuff like that that you'd be concerned about. But they're serviceable, they're doable, they're good, and they're cheap to own. One thing that I'm surprised by whenever I get in one of those cars, and I have recently, is they're not actually that great to drive. You know, the A8 was ultimately a front-wheel drive platform, even though they were all, by then, all-wheel drive cars. cars. They're not that luxury. They're not that soft and wafty and comfortable like the Mercedes-Benz S-Class or the 7 Series, but our goal here is not to maximize the experience. Our goal is to maximize the look of being rich. And this car does a better job. The style looks newer, and the connotation of a used A8 simply is better than a used 7 Series, which everybody knows is kind of a down and out car that people are trying to flex. Okay, last car on this list, cheap used cars that make you look rich. This was a suggestion that came from Filippo, and it's pretty true, and that would be the Tesla Model X. The Model S, the sedan, has gotten to a point where they're getting pretty cheap and people know it, but the X hasn't really changed how it has looked since it came out back in like 15. It basically looks the same. And it is the expensive one. Like, that's what people know about it. Like, it's the one with the doors that go up in the bigger design. It's the one you get if you're not just trying to buy a commuter car Model Y for a cheap lease deal. You want to get like the big one, the expensive one, because you're rich and you want to take your kids to school in a Tesla. Like, those are the ones, and they are not that expensive. Early Model X's are now $20,000 to $30,000. If you want to buy this car new, it's $100 plus, and it looks basically the same, and the tech isn't really that different either. And so a used Model X at 20 to 30 grand really is kind of an I'm rich, I have a Tesla Model X kind of thing. And stepping past the Model 3 and the Model Y and specifically choosing the X is definitely, like, when I see a Model 3 or Model Y, I do not assume a person is rich. Those are very common cars that are available with great deals. Basically anybody can buy them. A Model X, that's not the situation. If you have chosen not to get a 3 or a Y, you are getting an X because it is specifically like a desirable, like, you have the money, you want the space, you can afford it, you're not trying to get a bargain, you want to spend and get. And so those cars do have like a bit of a connotation of like, this person is pretty rich. And 20 to 30 grand does buy you a pretty nice used one, surprisingly, that again looks like a pretty nice new one. Okay, so that's my list of the 8 cheap cars that make you look rich. And I want to be clear, I have one more that is an honorable mention, which is, of course, and deserves to be on every one of these lists, a 1990s Rolls-Royce or Bentley. So if you buy a Bentley Turbo R from the early 90s or an old Rolls-Royce Silver Spirit, late 80s, early 90s, it is absolutely a cheap car that will make you look rich. The reason it is not on the main list and instead is an honorable mention is because it is so expensive to own and run that I do not necessarily consider it to be a cheap car, but it will make you look rich. You buy one of those, you buy it right, it's a nice car, you will look richer than any car I mentioned on this list. It's just that in order to maintain it, you do have to be pretty wealthy because these cars are pretty expensive to own. You have to go to specialists, they have interesting issues that regular mechanics cannot solve, and so that's a bit of a caveat. Nonetheless, those cars are cheap, they will make you look rich if you can afford to own them. But there you go, that's my list. Cheap cars that will make you look rich, in case you're going for that. You want that vibe. You want to show up in a nice neighborhood and have people think you belong. Get one of the cars on my list. You'll fit right in. And you don't have to spend much money to do it, at least up front.